Okay, so this is a PowerPoint about Sheila's confession. And the one thing that's really important to remember about all of the confessions is that not only will we find out about the incidents in the past, but we'll also find out very much about the people themselves. So we'll find out what is laudable or praiseworthy in Sheila's character, but we'll also see the flaws that are in Sheila's character. Now, you've already come across Sheila. You saw her during the engagement speech, and there's a level of immaturity there. Remember, think about her idiolect, how she talks about her mummy, and she uses colloquialisms with Eric, squiffy and ass. And so there's a level of immaturity that we can see through her language, but there's also something like hope within Sheila's character, because she makes clear to her mother that she's not going to follow her mother's footsteps and go down the same old road and come second place to business in her husband's life. And also you have that idea that there's some sense of insecurity within Sheila's character. And that insecurity is there because there's a lack of trust. Where was Gerald all last summer? She obviously feels that that's a question that needs to be answered completely, and she hasn't got a complete answer to that yet. Also with Sheila, you have that perhaps unpleasant link to materialism. Remember about her effusive and excited reaction to the ring. Now she really feels engaged when she has the ring. So she is a 20-something young woman. She's vain. That's a clear thing about her. And I suppose the worst thing we can say about Sheila is that she is complacent. Okay, she's happy with her life. And why shouldn't she be happy with her life? Every materialistic need is taken care of by her father and his money. But remember too, Sheila may have wealth and she may have status, but emotional connections are already weak. You know, how secure is that connection with Gerald if she's wondering about trust? How secure is that relationship with her father? You know, she teases him about being a purple-faced old man, which in one respect shows that she can tease him, that, you know, they have a relationship where that happens. But is there the respect there that should be? And also with her mother doesn't stand up for her. Her mother stands up for Gerald in relation to where were you last summer. And so perhaps Sheila feels that. So you've got the vain, complacent Sheila about to partake in her confession. But before we damn her, we need to remember that this is a young woman whose immaturity is a sign of perhaps poor parenting, as well as the fact that her life has been cosseted and that she has had every need and whim looked after by her parents' money. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so let's look at how we first see Sheila in this particular extract when she comes back in. Remember, she's left previously with her mother and she arrives in, and the stage direction, remember, we're thinking about language, we're thinking about drama elements. The stage direction is gaily, i.e. she's happy. But what I like about this, what I find intriguing, is the idea that her happiness is there and it's apparent, and of course it's her engagement night. Why should she not be happy? But what tickles her interest is her father's last line, which was in relation to Eva. He said, you know, did the girl get in trouble? Did she go on the streets? And we've talked about in class, what does that mean? It's a euphemism, folks. I'm not going to fit it all in. Nope, there. A little bit of my M has got in there, but sure, you can look at that later. Okay, but it's a euphemism for going on the streets means becoming a prostitute. And it's that idea of, oh, who's about in the streets? It's that idea of gossip, maybe salacious gossip that's linked to something unsavoury, something sexual. Remember, this is a time of repression. Young women would not talk about issues to do with physical intimacy. And Sheila says gaily, oh, what's this about streets? That's what piques her curiosity. And Berlin quickly dismisses it. No, nothing to do with you, Sheila, run on. And there's a nice little bit of irony there, nothing to do with you. Well, we're going to find out how much it has to do with Sheila. But if we want to criticise Sheila here for her happiness, we could also criticise her for her interest in something that is unsavoury. She has that gossipy side to her character, And as a young woman, complacent, happy with her life, that gossipy side is a flaw that perhaps we all could say we have. Okay, now, Berlin reacts angrily because what he wants to do is he wants to protect his daughter, and I think that's important because we often see Berlin as a flat character. It's just a bad man. He's a bad businessman. Oh, he's a horrible capitalist. But he's a father. He mightn't be a good father, but he is a father nonetheless. So he says, look here, Inspector, I considered this uncalled for and it's officious, i.e. that you're just doing your job and you're being too pernickety, you're being too reliant on the rules of your job. I've half a mind to report to you, and I like that because I think that's really the problem with Berlin, that he has half a mind. The rest of his mind that should be active and thinking is just always focused on capital and profit. I've told you all I know, and it doesn't seem so very important to me. That's because he doesn't understand. And now there isn't the slightest reason why my daughter should be dragged into this unpleasant business. So if we want a bit of a counter argument about Berlin, and of course we do if the question asks show how far, there he is trying to ensure that his child is not tainted by this scandal. He's trying to look out for her. He's trying to be a good father. Now, stage directions are important here because, look, Sheila says coming farther in. Now, that is really important. The reason why it is, well, first of all, you need an R in that. But apart from that, coming farther in is repeated. It's a stage direction that's been used in this scene twice. And it'll also be used with Eric's confession in Act 3. And so what it means is, okay, it's a stage direction. She's coming further into the room. Okay, but let's try and be a little bit more metaphorical. That coming farther in is perhaps representative of how she wants to come into the story. She wants to come into this business. Look, it's followed by two very short questions. What business? What's happening? She wants to be interested. But at this point, it's interesting. It's interesting her for all the wrong reasons, for the gossipy reasons, for the idea that this is a bit of an excitement. So even though that metaphorically coming farther in at this point suggests that she wants to be engaged with the story, she does, but for the wrong reasons, for the gossipy element of it. We'll find out how she comes further in later for the right reasons, for better reasons. The inspector says impressively, talks about what happened to Eva. But the crucial words here are, died after several hours of agony tonight in the infirmary. He's not shielding Sheila from anything. Look at the emotive language there, agony. So unlike her father, who wanted to shield her and protect her from this unpleasant business, the inspector is making the unpleasant business clear. And Sheila's reaction is, oh, how horrible. And remember, it's an exclamation, just like Eric explained, oh my God, that involuntary explanation he had when the inspector confronted him with the severity of what had happened to Eva. So that exclamation serves Sheila well. It shows again that idea that she has empathy, that she has a clear human streak that runs through her where she can connect with another human being and another human being suffering, which is different from, look at how Berlin reacted. He wanted to dismiss it. He just said, oh, nothing to do with this business, nothing to do with this horrid business. She immediately asks, was it an accident? And I suppose that tells you a little bit about her worldview, because everything is safe and cosy in her world. And therefore, when unpleasantness happens, it's an accident. It's never purposeful. It's never deliberate, because she's never come across that. And that shows perhaps her naivety. And then Gerald says, whenever Berlin talks about what he did to Eva and Sheila hears that, Gerald stands up for Berlin and says, I know we would have all done the same, and don't look like that, Sheila. And just with that line of dialogue, don't look like that, Sheila, you know that the actress who's playing Sheila, obviously her facial expression shows the same sort of horror that was in her voice in that previous line, oh, how horrible. Okay, let's move on. Right, okay, so at this stage Sheila still hasn't seen the photograph, she still doesn't know that she's involved, and look at the stage direction, she's rather distressed. So this has impacted upon her. She has felt that connection. She feels sorrow for the situation. And again, all of these things are positive because they show that Sheila is a character who is empathic. And she says, sorry, it's just that I can't help thinking about this girl destroying herself so horribly. Now, I quite like that because what you have there... Oh, there's the phone. Hold on, I'm going to have to pause. Right, back from that phone call. But so what you have there with destroying herself so horribly, look at the emotional engagement in that language. That is emotive language. It's not sparing anyone any sort of sensibility or feeling. Now, who else has been using language like that when talking about Eva? The inspector. So destroying herself so horribly, even at this early stage, there are signs that Sheila is coming closer to the inspector's point of view, because what she's done is she's absorbed his language. Hold on to get my pen again. She's absorbed his idiolect by using that harsh, that really emotive language in relation to Eva. And that shows that what you have here is a character, Sheila, who will become more and more like the inspector. They will become parallel characters. Just like Gerald and Berling have been presented as parallel characters, even at this early stage, you see a little clue as to where Sheila's going to go through that use of emotive diction. And remember, emotive diction, that's one of your methods. Tell the examiner that. Now, also what she does is she says, and I've been so happy tonight. Oh, I wish you hadn't told me. What was she like? Was she quite young? Now look at that too. I've been so happy tonight. So she's thinking about herself, but she's also thinking about Eva. There's that idea too that she's comparing her experience of happiness to Eva's experience of complete misery. And that ability to make the comparison is another step towards Sheila being this empathic character. I think it's also important to remember that Sheila is not saved. She's not this wonderful golden princess who is just like the inspector at this stage. You can see some of her flaws, and they're going to come out here. Look at this little interrogatory sentence. It's pretty. Oh, hold on. I'm going to pause. Okay, I can't really remember what the point was because there was somebody at the door there. But, oh yes, it's about Sheila and the pretty. That's important to her. Pretty. Was she pretty? And again, that lets you into perhaps one of the flaws in Sheila's character, that she is vain. But also, before we dismiss her just as this vain creature, she's obviously worried about that. So there's always a sense of insecurity there. She's a sense of insecurity about her looks and others. So if we want to judge Sheila kindly, her vanity is obviously some sense of insecurity. And sure, you had that already referenced back to where was Gerald last summer. She's insecure. Okay. Now, when the inspector says that he's not just here to talk to Berlin, but he's here to talk to other people, Berlin has this marked change in tone. Now, we saw Berlin trying to be protective of Sheila earlier on, but here there's a bit of a flip, a bit of a reversal of that, because he said, well, of course, if I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have called you officious and talked about reporting you. Don't you understand, inspectors? He's trying to make up for the rude impression that he's already made. But the idea that other people, including his own daughter, might be in some way linked to this takes the pressure off him. So if we wanted to give him brownie points for looking after Sheila and trying to make sure that she wasn't caught up in this unpleasant business, we'd maybe have to take some of those brownie points away by the fact that he feels the burden has been lifted off his shoulders a little bit, if Sheila and Eric and Gerald might be in some way responsible. So again, that idea that what Priestley wants to give as perhaps a positive with Berling will also be tempered or perhaps countered by something a little bit more negative, and you have it here with his marked change of tone. Okay, move on. Right. Again, now you have this idea of Sheila. Now, Sheila says to Inspector, what do you mean by that? You talk as if we were responsible. And that's important because remember, Berling, when he first was talking to the Inspector about this, used the word responsible when he didn't know what it meant. And Sheila talks in the same way. She uses the word responsible, but very quickly, she, instead of running away from responsibility, she starts to ponder it. So she starts to link herself to responsibility. It's not that she ultimately, at this stage, accepts it, because she doesn't. She's going to do something silly now and run away. But she links herself to responsibility, just like her father did. But responsibility isn't a hollow word for Sheila, perhaps the way it was with her dad. Berling cuts in. Now remember, he always is cutting in whenever we had that conversation earlier with Eric, this idea that his voice must dominate, and he says, just a minute, Sheila. Again, he doesn't really want Sheila to be getting herself involved in anything. So that cutting in When he has been cutting in with Eric, he's been doing it in a way to dismiss Eric's point of view. Here, that stage direction cutting in can be seen perhaps in a positive light, because what Berlin wants to do is safeguard Sheila, stopping her from admitting to something. And therefore, he cuts in to dismiss his son, but he also cuts in to try and protect his daughter. Sheila then cuts in again. Why should you? He's finished with you. He says it's one of us now. So she cuts into a bit bitterly there. But again, that's about empowerment. Sheila wants to know. So it's not as if she wants to run away. She wants to know, well, how am I involved in this? Again, she repeats to her father, I think it was a mean thing to do. Perhaps that spoiled everything for her. She's critical of her father. You've had that twice when you had the reference to the port, and here she's critical of him as well. So again, it suggests that here is a woman who has the potential to know her own mind if she steps up to the mark. Berling dismisses her rubbish. He says rubbish. And he's used that exclamation against Eric as well. So what you have here is Berling using the same pattern of behaviours with his son and his daughter for different reasons at times, but the same pattern of behaviour, pattern of parenting. And it's a poor pattern of parenting because, of course, it's all linked to his idea that his voice should dominate, a metaphor for how men like Berling believe that opposition can be drowned out by their thinking. You have the idea the inspector then says about poor Eva. You get an insight into her life. Few friends, lonely, half-starved. She was feeling desperate. And Sheila says warmly, I should think so. It's a rotten shame. And again, you have that idea of her making the empathic connection, the stage direction there, warmly, i.e. she is warm to the emotions of another person. And isn't that a nice wee juxtaposition? Do you remember, because isn't her mum called a cold woman? So where her mother is cold to the conditions of and experiences of others, Sheila is warm. She has that connection. Okay, let's move on. So the inspector then gives Sheila a little bit overview about what life is like. Do you remember Sheila thought whenever something happened to Eva, it must be an accident, because she lives in a world where she's protected by wealth. Wealth has built a cosy wall around her world, and she doesn't know what it's like to live outside it. So the inspector tells her there are a lot of young women living that sort of existence in every city and big town in the country, Miss Berling. If there weren't, the factories and warehouses wouldn't know where to look for cheap labour. And again, that idea that you would use a term, such a dismissive term as cheap labour, to talk about individuals, hundreds of thousands of individuals. And Sheila says, but these girls aren't cheap labour, they're people. Now that's a connection that Berling hasn't been able to make. Remember when he didn't know who Eva was, he didn't recognise that name? Was it because he was hiding the fact that he did? Or was it because he just doesn't recognise individuals who work for them? He just sees them as cheap labour. He sees them as a commodity to be owned. Commodity. I'm going to run out of room. A commodity, a group with no understanding of individuals and their needs. But Sheila does. She says these girls aren't cheap labour, they're people. And that's one of the most important things. Sheila is learning, Sheila is recognising, because Sheila is becoming aware of the situation outside her castle walls, I suppose. And the inspector agrees. I have the notion for myself from time to time. So here you see there's this connection, this interconnectivity between Sheila and the inspector. And again, he gives Sheila another idea of what life's like there. These young women counting their pennies in dingy little back rooms. Sheila's interested in what happened to Eva. Unlike her dad, she doesn't speculate about going on the streets or getting into trouble. She just wants to know what happened to her. And then Millwards is brought in. Sheila then tells Millwards, we go there. In fact, I was there this afternoon, artly to Gerald, for your benefit. And again, we've had lots of positive things here. This is a positive for Sheila. This is a positive for Sheila. But this is a negative for Sheila. Because as soon as Millwards is suggested, as soon as that name comes up, Sheila just thinks of herself. And that archly to Gerald is a tease that she's obviously been buying something pretty for her to wear that Gerald will appreciate. So just at the point where we see development and growth, we're reminded too of the flaw within her character and this idea of her as vain and self-centred. Okay, so this is the moment when the inspector shows Sheila the photograph. Remember, she hasn't seen it yet. He moves near the light and she crosses to him. He produces the photograph. She looks at it closely, recognises it with a little cry, gives a half-stifled sob and then runs out. Now, let's not be on our bandwagon going, go Sheila, she's great, she's the hope for the future and all that malarkey. Yes, she will be, but she's a work in progress. And what you have here is the idea that she's a coward. She's confronted with what she has done. She sees the eyes of Eva Smith. She recognises what she has done. And she doesn't come farther in. She runs away. And this is something that you have to really understand as a flaw in her character. That when first given the opportunity to take responsibility, she doesn't do it. She talks the talk. She said some very important things. She's made the connections. But she's still a vain, self-centered young woman rather, she's in her early 20s, and her immediate reaction is flight rather than acceptance. Now, when that happens, Berlin turns, staring angrily at the inspector. Look at the stage direction again. Berlin being a protective dad. We were having a nice family separation. The nasty mess you've made of it. And again, that shows the limitations of Berlin's thinking. He has not even connected. He's totally dismissed any association he's previously had with Eva. A nasty mess you've made of it. All he does here is try to project the guilt or project the blame onto others. And the inspector says steadily, that's more or less what I was thinking in the infirmary. A nice promising life, I thought, and a nasty mess somebody has made of it. And I just kept this bit in because, again, look at the cleverness of the inspector. He uses Berlin's words against him. He's done that previously with questions. It's my duty to ask questions. But he can use the words of Berlin against him, obviously exposing Berlin to be a selfish fool. Okay, now, again, Sheila's still away. She hasn't come back yet. And in her absence, Mr. Croft to Gerald says, should I go after her? And Berlin says no, that he'll do it. And then what you have here is an interesting line, one line of inquiry at a time. That idea that one line of inquiry, one route, one person needs to be examined at a time, that you need to connect with the individual at the time. And that's something that Mr. Croft and Berlin haven't done. They don't see individuals, they see cheap labour, they see a workforce, they don't see individuals. Whereas the inspector is the opposite of that. He's the antithesis of that. He sees individuals and connects with individuals. That's what he's there to do. To let Mr. Croft, Berlin, Mrs. Berlin, Sheila and Eric try to connect with people as individuals, to value them as that. Eric obviously is feeling a bit panicked. He burst out suddenly, and again, that's his immaturity. And look at his fractured syntax here. Look at the way that this sentence is broken up with the hyphens. I'm sorry, but you see, we're having a nice little party. I've had a few drinks, a lot of champagne. I've got a headache. Again, cowardly, appears cowardly, just like his sister at this point. So there's something that they have in common. The need to escape, the need to run away from responsibility if they can. Gerald says we're respectable citizens and not criminals, so there's a nice wee bit of irony there. I thought that was important for us to highlight. And the inspector links into that irony. He says they can't really tell the difference. And at this stage, we're not so sure ourselves. Okay, so Sheila comes back. Now, this is the importance of Sheila, that she returns. She was a coward, but now she shows her potential, that she comes back. She's been crying. And look, here you have coming in, closing the door. Now, if you remember, she came farther in, that she was interested, but now she comes in and closes the door. And is that closing the door a metaphor for the idea that she is now closing off that part of her life where she was selfish, where she was vain, where she was irresponsible, where she didn't see people as individuals? Is she closing that off and now entering into the world of the inspector, the room that the inspector controls? And in some ways it is, because this is probably where we see the best of her and the worst of her. Remember that there is that paradox within her character, that she has unbelievable flaws like her selfishness and her immaturity and her vanity, but then she has great potential, like her ability to be empathic and to connect herself with Eva. You knew it was me all the time, didn't you? Now, again, there's this connection. She understands the way the inspector's operating in a way that nobody else does. And that connection is going to be strengthened in the next little while. Sheila says, I've told my father, he didn't seem to think much about it, but I felt rotten about the time and I feel worse now. So again, Sheila acted in a way that she knew was morally wrong. It had consequences. And I think this is brave. Did it make much difference to her? She wants to know more. She wants to know the extent of her blame. She just wants to know how culpable she is, and that's how much blame rests on her shoulders. Now, that is a great act of maturity. She doesn't just want to know, am I to blame? Yes. She wants to know, tell me the extent that I'm to blame. Give me the detail, because she's not shirking anything here. This is a level of maturity for Sheila. Miserably, so am I really responsible? Again, that idea that she wants to take it on board. And the inspector gives her a bit of hope. He says, no, not entirely. A good deal happened after that, but you're partly to blame. So the inspector, he doesn't make it easy for her. Remember how he confronted her with shocking language. But what he does is he recognises that there's this movement within Sheila. He recognises that she's advancing morally. And look, she's distressed. She's distressed, not just distressed because of the situation, because she accepts that she is at fault in this particular situation, and she knows how much it has affected Eva. Okay, so you've got that stage direction, distressed, and look here, because I was in a furious temper. She is clear. She's honest. She has that self-awareness. Now, that's something, odd. That's an R, folks. Oh, it looks weird, but sure, it's self-awareness. She has that potential to know herself, to recognise herself as she is. Now, this is something that her mummy never will do, and you'll see how far that goes in Act 2. Her mum can't see her faults. Do you remember when her mum criticised her dad because he was offering the cook the congratulations, told Edna to offer the cook the congratulations. So Mrs. Burling exposes the faults in others, but cannot see the fault in her own self. Here Sheila can see her own fault. She has that self-awareness. And she says, no, not really. It was my own fault. You have that idea that she's accepting that mea culpa. It's my fault. And look there. All right, Gerald, you needn't look at me that way. At least I'm trying to tell the truth. You have clear this idea that their relationship isn't supportive. It's not supportive at this moment in time. And Sheila's always been aware of that. Let's go back to last summer. She knows that there's a vulnerability within their relationship, that she's felt an insecurity, and here it comes out. But here, okay, you could say that she's quite bitter to Gerald. Yes, indeed. But she's being clear of what she's trying to do. I'm trying to tell the truth. She almost breaks down but controls herself. And again, that stage direct's important. She controls herself. She takes control. She accepts responsibility for having to say this because she knows that she's responsible for what she's done. So that shows strength. This is a character who's shown strength intermittently. She showed strength in front of her mum when she said, oh no, I don't think I will get used to coming second place in business. But here she's showing moral strength, moral courage to say everything that needs to be said and to be honest, to confess. This is a proper confession in front of others, a public confession. I don't suppose I should have done it, but she was very pretty and looked as if she could take care of herself. I couldn't be sorry for her. Now, look at that. That's the huge flaw that was in Sheila, that she was vain and selfish and she couldn't be sorry for her. That is a flaw in her character. But what is an asset to her character is the fact that now she can say that honestly. Well, I couldn't be sorry for her then. She's not saying I can't be sorry for her now, because everything that she said and done shows that she is. But what she's doing is she's exposing her flaws to the others in front of her and to herself. And that takes moral courage. And then she says, yes, but it didn't seem to be anything very bearable at the time. Don't you understand? And if I could help her now, I would. Now, the inspector cuts her off there because she's starting to get self-centred again. She's starting to be protective and have this sort of defensive mechanism, making excuses for her behaviour. And the inspector cuts her off harshly. Look at that stage direction. Cuts her off harshly because making excuses is not what he wants her to do. What he wants her to do is what she does up here, which is be honest. So as soon as she starts to fall back into that old trick of making excuses, of finding, that old trick of being complacent, that, oh, look, it wasn't my fault, it was somebody else's. He is harsh on her. That's the first time that the stage direction says harshly in relation to Sheila. Yes, but you can't. It's too late. She's dead. Now, they look at those. They are emphatic statements, short, curt little statements, hammering it home to Sheila. And he has to, because that little line shows how easily it would be for Sheila to fall back into her own ways. He hammers this lesson home to her at the point where she could have just very easily have taken the route that her father did, which was, oh, well, look, I have an excuse for my behaviour. And when Sheila exposes what she did, now it's very clear what she did. It's there, the dress, that she used her status to get Sheila fired. So again, that idea of, nepotism that her dad tried to use with linking to the chief constable and to the golf club, she uses that. And Gerald says, my God, it's a bit thick when you come to think of it. Even Gerald recognises how bad, Eric recognises how bad that is. And look, there's old Sheila, stormily, oh, shut up, Eric. But then, I know. So again, this is a woman who's at the cusp of acceptance, who's at the cusp of maturity. She's making a step into this unknown world of self-reliance and self-awareness. She can't just jump in and suddenly be completely transformed, but this is a journey for her, and that's what the inspector wants to do. She's making, I suppose, incremental steps. Incremental means like baby steps, small steps. She's making incremental steps towards a new way of thinking, and that way of thinking is the inspector's way of thinking, a socialist way of thinking, a way of thinking that is not morally corrupt, is not centred on individualism. She said, I know it's the only time I've ever done anything like that. I'll never do it again. Repetition, showing how emphatic she is about that. And then she says, I noticed them giving me a sort of look sometimes at Millwards. I noticed it even this afternoon. I suppose some of them remember. I feel now that I can never go there again. Oh, why had this had to happen? And again, if you read that, it's again that self-indulgence that she had earlier about, oh, it's my fault, or it's not my fault, rather, there's an excuse. Perhaps she's been a bit self-indulgent. She's thinking about herself at this moment in time and how the Millward staff are acting in relation to herself. This isn't about you, Sheila. This is about what you've done to that poor girl. And again, what the inspector does, he takes a step to remedy that thinking, to stop it. And you've got it with that stage direction, sternly. That's what I asked myself tonight. He brings it back to Eva. So whatever Sheila makes a step, and maybe makes a tiny step backwards, becomes a bit self-indulgent with it, a bit self-centered, the inspector's there with that snap stage direction to take her right back to what's important. And the good thing is that she goes back with him. Okay, so that takes us to the end of Sheila's confession. There was a lot there. Go back, listen to it, make what notes you need, and then you're going to ask me questions about this in class tomorrow, okay? Well, actually on Friday, but I want you to ask me questions about this. I want you to be 100% clear on this. Okay, everybody, that's great. That's a wrap.